Welcome to module 32 of Database Management Systems course in the IIT Madras online BSc program. In the last module, we have started discussing about how to develop applications using databases at the back end. We had a glimpse of a collection of application programs. We understood that in spite of the variety, there is a strong commonality which we call the architecture of these applications, which is typically 3-tier: presentation, business logic and data access layer. We saw the classification and evolution of architectures and taken a glimpse at few sample applications which you are to study and understand in more detail yourself. So, this is what we are going to do. Okay. I will start with, though it is not really a part of this course, but since I am not sure how many of you are familiar, so I will start with some fundamental definitions of the World Wide Web, WWW, so web fundamentals. So, it is a distributed information system which is based on hypertext, which means that most documents are hypertext document and they are formatted using HTML, which is hypertext markup language, which is a W3C standard. So, that contains texts along with specification of the font and other formatting, and it has, why is it hypertext? Because it has links to other documents, right, which can be associated with certain regions of the text. We say click this URL kind of. It can contain forms to collect data from the user. So, this basically is our basic document definition. Now, for identity we have what is called a uniform resource locator. That is, since documents are distributed worldwide, I need to have a mechanism to identify it, locate it. So, we have a URL, and if you look at this URL, there is a initial part which is HTTP, standing for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which says in what mechanism I should interact with that document, and we will talk a little bit more about that later. Second part locates the unique name of the machine in the internet, in this entire world, which is supposed to have that document. And whatever you have after that could be very, very long, is the actual location of the document within that machine, right. So, one is how you interact with the document, where do you find the document, which machine, and then the rest is the location in the machine. So, it could be also a document in your machine or in some other machine. So, for example, if I want to access this document, a local machine, then I will use a starting which is file : different from HTTP : this tells us go and look in the internet, World Wide Web. This tells us look in the local machine, right, and then it gives the path. So, since this pertains to local machine, so I do not need to say that how to identify the machine, right. I can just directly go to the path of the document. Of course, there is an alternate way. The local machine can be called a local host, which could again have an IP address, which is locating the machine, and then you have the path to the actual document in that machine. Besides the protocol, the machine, you could also actually send a query to that. Instead of looking for a document, you can send a query. So, you can send parameters with this request, and that is here what we are saying is you do search with parameter q is equal to Servlets search, right. So, you can give multiple parameters. So, that is the basic purpose of the URL and typically you will hear that there are three terms that go around. Of course, URL is something which you are most familiar with, which is this whole thing. Of this is called URN, that is the name of the document. This is this is URI, the identifier, the actual, what name the document is stored with. These are called the URN, Uniform Resource Name, right. So, URN is more like a person's name, and URL is more like person's address where you can find that person, right. So, we will typically use the term URL, and at times when we want to generalize we will say URI, right? But mostly URL. HTML we have talked of. HTTP is a protocol which is used for communicating with the machine which has or which knows where your document can be found. HTML, as we said, will select from a set of options, pop-up menus, radio, etc. will enter values, and you can fill up the input as you always do. This is an HTML sample just for your understanding. So, HTML is, these are known as tags. So, you have a corner bracket and you write some, these are predefined, there are, in certain way you can define them, but take this as predefined. Every tag has a meaning. So, it's a parenthesized expression which starts from a tag HTML and ends with the same tag, and the end is marked by having a forward slash before the tag name. So, I have the whole HTML page, and in this I have a body which gives me the body of the page. In the body I have a table, and the tag actually is table, and the tag qualifier is border, which says that the table must come with a border. This is the end of table, and then we have tags for table entries. So, TR is table row, this is table row end. So, we are talking about this first row. TH says it is a table header. So, you can see that it comes as a different font, comes in bold and little bigger. So, TH ID / TH tells you that ID is a header. This is the next header, this is the next header. So, you can see there are three headers, that is the first row. This is the second row which says table data TD, the next one 00128, then Jang, then Com Science, the 3. So, everything is in terms of parenthesis, and this entire thing forms another row, and the sequence of rows, any number of them, will be the entire table, as you can see. So, after that you have form action. So, you have another HTML element called form, which is to enter data, right. Now, we say with the form we say the qualifier is action for which we have given a name person query. How do we know? How would we know this action? So, we will call it person query. Method is get, which says that when the HTML is completed, submitted, then what should we do? You should get that data. That is what I intend to do, right. Now, on this form, here if you look at, then I have written search for, which is a normal text, comes as search for, and then here I have a drop down which has multiple options. One option is student, one option is instructor. So, it is saying option begin, option end, option begin, option end, right. So, as I click on here at this point, this will drop down, and whatever I have selected becomes the option that I have taken. Right. Then I have a break because I want to go to the next line. Then I have a plain text name, which I say is followed by a box, edit box. Input type is text, size is 20, its internal name is name. So, I will identify whatever you enter, I will identify it as name. And then I have input type is submit, the value is submit, that you will submit this to get, value is submit. So, this button shows as a submit, right. So, if you just correspond, you will be able to, and after you have done this for a couple of HTML pages and corresponding displays, you will learn this pretty easily. It is not that you regularly need to write in raw HTML, but it helps to be able to read it quickly. Now, HTTP protocol is connectionless. What is connectionless? Connectionless is, say you have when you call someone on a phone, then it is connection oriented, because you dial, you get connected as long as you want to talk, and then you disconnect. So, you are thoroughly connected. But when you send a WhatsApp message, it is connectionless, because you send the message, the person will see it at some point of time, and the person will respond. You will receive that message and you will see it some point of time. It is not necessary that both of you have to be present at the same time and remain connected all through for this communication to go on. So, that is connectionless. So, HTTP is connectionless. You send a request, you get a response from the service. You send another request, you get a response. Now, this is fine as long as you are just requesting for static pages, like in Google. You put a search query, you send, it gives you a response. You read that, go to the links and so on. But suppose when you are in net banking, you have logged in, send the request, you have got the login. Now, when you send the next request that show me the account details, the server has to know that it is the same you who were authenticated earlier, who is asking for that report, otherwise it cannot be given. Which means that every time this kind of an authentication information has to go with your request for information from the server. This becomes a huge load on the server. Also becomes a pretty much of a security risk, because you are sending your authentication information every time. So, if everybody will get a lot more of opportunity to break it, right. So, we use something here as what is called a cookie. Cookie is a small unit of information. So, when you do the authentication, send the request, you are authenticated, the response comes back saying that you are authenticated, and it says, it starts, a session has started. That is, for a certain period of time, as you keep on doing the interaction, the server is going to remember that it is you. How will the server do that? It will send you a piece of information called a cookie. A small text contains the identifying information in encrypted form. Now, every time, the time you make the next request, this cookie goes back with that request, and server, as it has issued the cookie, remembers that it has issued the cookie. So, when it gets the request along with a cookie, it checks whether that is a valid cookie which is live still. If then it continues the operation. But if it does not find a cookie here, then it sends for fresh authentication, right. So, that is the basic mechanism, and for the time for which this liveness of the, I should say, virtual connection, this is not direct connection, but a virtual connection remains, is called a session. So, while working on different net banking or booking sites and so on, you must have come across that you have 10 seconds left, you have 2 minutes left, and then you are suddenly told your connection will get timeout. That is the concept of the timeout. Now, the question is, why doesn't the server remember the cookie forever? That is for several reasons. One is, in that way, it does not, if you forget to explicitly log out and cancel the cookie, it will never get lost. It will remain to be in the server, and server will create a lot of this junk. But a more important concern is, it may be possible that you are not using the application for a long time, means that you may not have access to that application. Somebody else may have got an access to the application. So, to protect you, it chooses a timeout option, that after this much time, from the last request, if no other request has happened, then it is timed out. The cookie is considered dirty and thrown away. Right? So, that is the concept of a session. Now, web browser, all of you know, the web browser is the application program through which HTML is rendered. The rendering is a process by which the text is made into the graphics, and there is certain types of styling, and non-text element can be shown, like images, videos, even sound. So, there is a rendering machine which does that. I will not take more time to go into the browsers. As of last year, it is estimated that about nearly 5 billion people used a browser. Most used is Google Chrome with a 64%, followed by Apple's Safari at 19%. Web server, on the other side, is basic service provider, which gets a HTTP request, forms a response to that through some mechanism, makes it into an HTML and sends you back. So, it could be a web service, could be simply another program which does this, or it could be a big web server, and as you learn more, you will see that. But the basic purpose of the web server is to get an HTTP request and give out the result HTML. Right? Now, other than HTTP also, there are other kinds of services particularly used for transferring larger volumes of data, or maybe some unstructured data. They are known as REST and JSON and so on. So, when you learn about web services in depth, you will learn about them. I just wanted to mention so that you know where these terms exist. So, this is in short, this is what where we are. So, this is in your web architecture, this is your front end, this is your web server, which will actually go to the database or the file system. It could get the document directly from the file system, it could run a query from the database, get it here, make it into HTML. So, you send a request here which goes in HTTP, the web server does this backend job and sends back a response which is HTML. So, this is a basic web architecture, and you can see that the application architecture is basically trying to follow that. Now, we will briefly talk about scripting. Scripts are nothing but programming languages, but the difference being that they are typically text, they are small, and they are usually interpreted within another program. So, typically when we write a C++ program, we need to first write the program, compile it, and on compilation correct, we execute. So, if we make a change in the source program, my executable does not change, but script is not like that. Script is a piece of text which is a program, some instructions, and every time you want to run it, you need to interpret. That is, you compile and run at the same time. These are typically small and done for dynamic systems. So, there are several scripting languages, some of them I have mentioned here. Now, here there are a lot of tasks for which we need scripting in case of web application. Many of those scripts run in the browser, and they are called client side script. Okay. For example, I put a date and it needs to be validated to be a correct date. You could have done it through going to the server also. You could take the date, go to the server or application layer checks whether it's a valid date, comes back and tells you. That would mean lot more of internet time. That would mean lot of delay. Whereas to check for a valid date is a simple logic. So you can implement it in terms of a script which can run within the browser. This is an interesting concept, that you are running a program not directly on the machine, but you are running it through a simulation, and that is in the browser. So it's something like you have a similar situation for a JVM or PVM for Java and Python, but this is a very typical client side scripting that you can do within the browser itself. The other option is you will have several such requirements of processing, validation, extraction in the server end. So those are also often done in terms of scripting language. Those are called client server side scripting. So you have scripting, but these two are different. At the server side, you could be doing connecting to a database, you could be extracting data and so on, so forth. Now the question is, why do you use it as a script? Because many a times every individual task is a small one, and it's after having done the task you need to create the HTML. So this process of creating the HTML or the tags and so on, so that you can display it nicely, is far more difficult to do in a normal programming language than in a script, which you can visualize as if you have an HTML page with certain information missing. The script can come and set those information so that your page is ready. Now since this is in the server, this has lot more power, this can have lot more computing. So typically it does not, unlike the client side, it does not run within another application. You may have a separate engine which runs your script, which is called the scripting engine. So a modified view turns out to be that you have client side scripts which validates, and when it is validated, then the request can come, it is taken up by the preprocessor, chooses the right script in the scripting engine, which does the scripting, does the computation, gets the data, generates the result as a translated HTML, locates that page template, gets the final HTML, returns it back here to the client. Right? So scripting at both these two ends basically are technological mechanisms to make the whole system far more efficient and easy to use and easy to change. So there are several ways to do client side scripting. Many browsers execute them in the safe mode at the client side, which means that your security is not compromised. There are several, naturally JavaScript you must have heard of. This is something you need a Flash plugin to be set to see, different media files. This is to see your SVG kind of dynamic graphics files, applets and so on. It could be variety of different these kinds of client side scripting option exist. Now security is certainly a concern for the client side scripting, because what if some malicious script has come to your machine and through the browser it spoils your machine. So for that there is very limited options are given to the scripting language at the client side. For example, typically the scripts are not allowed to write anything on your disk, because then they could write a virus. Right? It will not allow any Java applet code or equivalent scripting language will not allow anything to be executed outside of the browser. Right? So that security is kind of built in. The most common is JavaScript, which follows a document object model. I will not get into the details of that. You study when you do the web services in general, but this is just to give you an example. For example, here you say that the script is a JavaScript and you are doing a validation function. What it is saying? That you have taken a credits amount by getting the element by ID. So, credits was a HTML element, some value has been entered and you take that. And what you are checking? You checking is NaN. NaN is not a number. The credit has to be a number. So, if it is not a number, it fails. This becomes true, that is, it is not a number. Is credit less than equal to 0 or if credit greater than equal to 16? If that happens, then you throw an alert. So, what you get to see that you enter 5, it works okay. You enter -3 or you enter PPD or you enter 17, you will get an alert saying that the credit must be. And this whole thing is happening without an HTTP request being sent to the sender, all in the JavaScript, right. So, that is the basic basic mechanism of JavaScript. Similarly, you have server side scripts, as I said, which take a request, do the scripting processing and prepares your final HTML for return. The most commonly used are these days are JSP, PHP. Once ASP used to be also very popular earlier, but some general purpose languages like Python can also be used for this purpose because they are also scripting languages. And as a part of the scripting, as I said, that instead of just running the script within another program, it makes it into a small program by itself. So, these are called servlets. Why servlets? They are servers because they are providing a service based on the input, and they are like book to booklet is a small book. Similarly, server to servlet is a small service, just one small service, and you can have many of them, so that it becomes a lot more manageable. You do not, because at a time, at any request, you do not have too many things to do. Every request is a small thing and you would have possibly a separate servlet. They run on thread because same instances of the multiple instances of the same servlet could run at the same time because different users have requested for the same service. So, servlet is a very strong concept in the on the server side. So, these are some typical examples, which is running the servlet and in the format actually filling in the HTML. So, this is a header line, this is a body part we had shown, and what does it get in the body? You can, this is where it is building the body. It goes to the database to get the data, the HTMLs for the table, and this is for the header part we had seen, and this is where one by one for each, as many results have come, for each it is creating a row and putting in. Very simple. I mean, the HTML example you saw, that is getting automatically generated based on the result that we have got from the database. How we got it from the database is something we will discuss, but this is how a servlet typically would work. So, naturally servlets have sessions we have talked about. So, you can see that for a request, if the get session tells you that the session is live, then you continue, otherwise you redirect to authenticate and start a new session after authentication and keep that as a new cookie. This is servlets are supported on multiple web servers, like Apache Tomcat is one of the most widely used, then IBM WebSphere, there are several of them. J2EE has options for that. The other one which is very popular is Java server page, which is kind of the same concept, the only difference being that there you are using it like a programming language and generating the HTML. Here you have the HTML in the format and you are just putting the, so you have written as if an HTML and then you have certain parts which are missing, which is like what you will put in this hello the name part you will get as a parameter and put that. So, that part is missing. So, it is compiled into Java plus servlet and then you run it. The advantage is it is much easier to write an HTML embedding in this way instead of writing it by text output as we were seeing here earlier. Similarly, you have PHP, another mechanism at the server scripting, and JSP is actually getting preferred a lot over the competitive ones like ASP. ASP is proprietary for Microsoft and uses proprietary VB. JSP is platform independent, portable easily. Against pure servlets, as I said, it is much easier to write in the HTML format of JSP than having to write them by cout statements or print line statements and so on. And certainly don't confuse between JSP, Java server page, and JavaScript. JavaScript is client side, runs in the browser. JSP is server side, runs in the server. And obviously, it is much better than static HTML, which cannot have a dynamic information. So, we have got introduced to some basic notions of the web fundamentals and the technology for applications about including scripting and servlets. This brings us to the end of the module. See you again in the next module. Thank you for your attention. We will continue discussions on the application development.